Who killed Jamal Khashoggi? Turkey says it now has evidence he was killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Donald Trump says rogue killers may have done it. But was it an investigation that went wrong? Or was a hit squad sent to silence Khashoggi? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. The joint Saudi-Turkish team investigating the case of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi has searched the consulate, and now attention is turned to the consul's home. The Turkish Attorney General's office also told Al Jazeera there is evidence Khashoggi was killed inside the consulate. Media sources in the US suggest Saudi Arabia will say he died during an interrogation that went wrong. King Salman said he didn't know anything about it in a phone call with President Donald Trump, who then came up with his rogue killers theory. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is now in Riyadh, hoping to get answers. I spoke earlier to a Saudi prince, Prince Khalid bin Farhan Al Saud, who's living in exile. I first asked him why he feels his life is under threat from the Saudi authorities.
In the name of Allah, I am personally, 3 years ago, I has been targeted, and my life has been targeted in a rational way, not the way that used with Jamal Khashoggi. May Allah bestow His mercy on him. I was in a state of poison, and it was a sort of poison. I don't know exactly what is it, but after a while, like 1 week, I started to feel dizzy, and I went into coma. I went to the hospital, and the kidney has stopped together with the liver, with 4 brain strokes. I stayed at the hospital for 3 months. They treated me with cortisone. I left the hospital and I stayed using the cortisone with checkups for a long time. And I have been affected. I put weight like 25 kilograms. The respiratory system has been affected and all my organs have been affected. The type of that poison left me in a state that I cannot move, I cannot do anything, but thank God I was in Germany. Medicine in Germany was okay, and at the hospital, doctors had to know what is that kind of poison, and I went through a surgery on my brain. They opened my head and took a sample in order to know the type of the poison that I got. I stayed at the hospital for a long time. They took the sample, and I was really about to die.
Prince Khalid, what makes you so sure that it was the Saudis behind all of this?
I don't know exactly what do they want. I am talking the right way, and if you try to be straightforward, then they want to assassinate and kill you.
But do you have any proof that it was the Saudis that came after you?
My brother, generally, I don't have enemies. My friends and my relatives and my people love me. All my friends love me. Even my friends in the primary school are in touch with me on WhatsApp since we were kids. Thank God. People love me. I have good contacts. I have no enemies except the Saudi government, because since Salman has taken power after being in Riyadh as the governor of Riyadh for 50 years, I had problem with King Salman. I had also problems with him long time ago. I left Saudi Arabia and I came to Germany since 2003, but he doesn't want to leave me alone. No one has an interest to kill me except King Salman. in particular King Salman. No one aims at killing me except Salman ibn Abdulaziz.
Now, when you were in 3 weeks ago, you say that you were under threat, that you were going to be forcibly disappeared by the Saudi authorities. This was before Jamal Khashoggi's case. What made you think that your life was in imminent danger?
I'm not going to tell the story again, but I have understood that my importance comes from being a member of the royal family who criticizes the family itself. That's why my words affect them more and more, better even than the opposition. I am and I will be always their target to be assassinated by King Salman and his administration. And years ago, they have put me on a list of people to be assassinated. I've told the police in Germany this few years ago. They have tried several times to drag me into certain positions until the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. May Allah bestow His mercy on him. They told me, take money, this is a check, you can have it in Egypt. And a lot of things they are trying to convince me to do. But don't tell me that you want me to be financially okay. I'm living in Germany, I'm not living in Saudi Arabia. And they behave in a childish manner. Even their crimes or the ways that they are trying to drag me to be pulled into their way is not a rational way. They are childish behavior. Why should I go to Egypt to have a check? Why should I go there to have a check? Then they want me to go to Egypt and then I will be transferred into Saudi Arabia again.
Prince Khalid, thank you very much. We still don't know whether Jamal Khashoggi has been assassinated in the embassy. We're waiting, in the consulate rather, we're waiting for evidence to emerge from that. But thank you very much for your time. Let's bring in our guest. Joining us now from Ankara is Osman Sert. He is the research director at the Ankara Institute and a former advisor to Turkish Prime Minister Davutoglu. In Washington, D.C., we have John Jones. He's a former U.S. senior congressional advisor and Senate National Security Director. And finally, joining us from Istanbul is Salman Akshungay with the Istanbul Center of International Law. Welcome to you all. Really, there seems to be three parts currently to the Khashoggi affair. You have the US that says it has evidence linking the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to a botched kidnapping plot. You have the Turkish authorities leaking to the media that they have evidence that he was murdered inside the consulate. And now you have a flurry of diplomatic activity taking place. And reasons and excuses and a lot of talk within the media itself and a lot of speculation about what that diplomatic activity might be. Let's start with Ankara first and with Osman Sert. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, is going to Ankara. What's likely behind that visit?
First of all, Mr. Pompeo's visits in Saudi Arabia, because the American interests are at stake in the region, because Mohammed bin Salman is most probably more important than the whole Saudi family and the Saudi kingdom. And that's why I think Mr. Pompeo is trying to find a face-saving exit. First of all, Mohammed bin Salman, and then for the American interests over there. We have seen that what Mr. Trump said, rogue killers. It is not easy to believe in such kind of an excuse because, you know, this 15 men of the Saudi squad team was composed of the very close guards of Mohammed bin Salman. In a state like Saudi Arabia, it is not possible to happen such kind of a two private jet planes, which was being used by the kingdom, can fly from Riyadh to Ankara to Istanbul and do such kind of a thing and go back without the knowledge of Mohammed bin Salman. And they are trying to manage the process. Of course, we don't know what he will be bringing to Ankara from Saudi Arabia. But what Mr. Çavuşoğlu, the Turkish foreign minister, said today is that, you know, there's a claim that it was happened by accident during an interrogation. The Turkish foreign minister said that it is not a place to interrogate. The consulates are not courts, and it is not a place of interrogation. And that's why, first of all, we need to see what Mr. Pompeo will bring in with him from Riyadh, but they are trying to find a way between the realities over there, which is a murder, and the American interest, and to keep Mohammed bin Salman in the game, I think.
Would you agree with that, John Jones? Is it about keeping Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, in the game, as our guest from Ankara just said?
No, I think one could look at that as being part of the explanation, but when you look at it, the U.S.-Saudi relationship is a relationship that goes back 7 decades and is bigger than any one official leader or member of the royal family. I believe Mr. Pompeo is there to, number one, get all the answers, get the understanding of what actually took place and what the Saudi authorities are going to put forth as to what exactly happened. But at the end of the day, it's quite obvious. No one is going to get to the bottom of what actually happened unless you have a true, independent, transparent investigation to determine how this killing took place and who's actually responsible. In the end, I imagine that authorities will get there. It's obviously going to take some time, but demands are being made, and demands are for transparency, accountability, and for the truth to come out. And I think eventually that's going to happen.
Well, let's bring in Istanbul here and Salman Khashoggi. Now, the truth should come out. The truth will come out eventually. That's what our guest from Washington, D.C. has said. As an expert in international law, you perhaps a much better place to tell us how difficult any investigation might be into all of this. Is Turkey ready and prepared to do what it needs to get to the bottom of the Khashoggi affair?
Well, the major problem and the major challenge will be the cooperation with the Saudi authorities. Turkey is trying to keep a balance between its obligation to not interfere with the consular relation and consular mission of the Saudi Arabia, and at the same time trying to protect the human rights and the life of the Mr. Khashoggi. So it's really hard for a receiving state, a territorial state, to keep a balance here. Well, initially, the Saudi Arabia, after the 2nd of October, they stated that they're going to give their consent for the Turkish authorities to make a full-fledged investigation to cover up what was happened inside the consulate premises. But then they tried to delay the investigation, and after 2 weeks, it's only now that the Turkish authorities has been available and able to make a full-fledged investigation inside the premises. And unlike the diplomatic immunities, the immunity of the consular staff is functional, not an absolute immunity. Therefore, the Turkish authorities, if they find enough evidence that the Mr. Khashoggi has been abducted and executed by consular staff within the consular premises, then the case might be open against the consular staff, and under the Article 41 of the Vienna Convention of the Consular Relations 63, the Saudi consulate staff are obliged to appear before the court either as witness or as accused, and then they have to provide all the information that they have. The problem with conducting such investigation and prosecution is that there are no executing power in this case. If the Saudi Arabia will not waive their immunity, then Turkish authorities will not be able to execute the decision of the court.
You use the words there.
Most challenging thing.
You use the words there, cover up. I want to bring in Ankara here and Osman Sert. Osman, with all of this flurry of diplomatic activity, with the US Secretary of State visiting Riyadh, visiting Ankara, with the phone calls between the US leader and King Salman, is there evidence that Saudi Arabia is far too big to fail, that the US-Saudi relationship is far too crucial, and therefore Jamal Khashoggi, his case, or whatever has happened to him, is simply being used as a pawn to make sure that business goes on as normal?
Mr. Khan, first of all, let me correct one thing. Mr. Gentleman talking from Washington said that there's 7 decades of relations between the Saudi Arabia and the United States. It's right. But during the Trump era, trying to explain the American foreign policy, I think using decades is a bit naive because, maybe weeks. because what is happening with North Korea, what's happening with Russia, what's happening with NATO allies, it is not easy to explain the Trump era foreign policy with decades, maybe weeks or maybe months at most. Suddenly the Trump administration can change their policies. Regarding what does it mean, your question, it is not easy. It is not easy to just close the case and go business as usual, because what's happened is a very extraordinary case happening. First of all, for Turkey, the Turkish sovereignty is being targeted with this, because the Saudi consulate in Istanbul is in Turkish soil. And Turkey cannot just, the Mohammed bin Salman cannot go with impunity.
Let me just stop you there. Let me just stop you there. Is it a cover-up? Is it a cover-up? Do you think what the US is doing and everybody, all the partners involved and all the different countries involved, is there potential for a cover-up, or is it a cover-up?
Look, for 10 days, the United States president waited to give a reaction to what happened over there. Probably he was already briefed about what's happening in Istanbul, and who's Mr. Khashoggi's daughter is an American citizen. He is writing down for Washington Post. Hundreds of articles are being published, and 10 days they waited. They waited for what? And that's why there's at least a question mark about it. But because of the very huge reaction against what's happening here, about the diplomatic tradition, about the Turkey's sovereignty, and that's why it won't be easy to cover it. And
John Jones, you're shaking your head there. You're shaking your head there, John Jones. What do you think of what our guest in Ankara is saying?
Oh, no. The gentleman from Ankara makes a very interesting argument, though I would disagree with him when saying that you only can look at this situation within the matter of the last few days or years of the Trump administration. It's important to look at the genesis of the relationship as it pertains to this particular situation. And if you look at the U.S.-Saudi relationship or the larger relationship in the Middle East, there is easy to develop an obsession with President Trump and his actions, but you also have to look at historical actions. Congress has taken steps to act no matter what a commander-in-chief or president has chosen to do as it pertains to a situation like this. If you look at the situation in terms of apartheid in South Africa, it was Congress who acted outside of the wishes of Ronald Reagan to implement sanctions on the South African government. If you look at what Congress did in relationship to the development of Iran's nuclear program, it was Congress who implemented sanctions despite what President Obama wanted or did not want to do. And no matter what President Trump or his administration decides to do in this event, Congress is going to act. Both Republicans and Democrats have already said that. So I think if you look at the situation forward, there was going to be pressure on the Saudi government. And with that pressure, I do believe there will be concessions. Will they be immediate? No. Should they be immediate? Absolutely. This is a tragedy which is taking place. A tragic killing took place within a consulate. This is awful. And I do think at the end of the day, you will have forces and powers outside of the president and the administration who will be demanding accountability and information.
John James, I'm just going to stay with you for a second. Let's talk about the wild card in the room here. If the Saudis come out and say this was rogue intelligence agents that botched an operation that the royal family, that the leadership simply didn't know about, is that going to be acceptable to somebody like the Washington Post, who have put almost all of their resources into covering the disappearance of their own journalist? Will they believe something like that? And will they continue to put pressure on domestic American politicians to get to the truth of the matter?
I think at the end of the day, it just won't be American politicians who will be encouraged to act. Quite frankly, a number of them don't need the motivation. There are people within Congress and the Senate who are outraged by what have taken place, and they've been very vocal about that. But more than that, I would imagine that you will also have politicians within the European Union who will be demanding action and demanding a response that is proportional to what actually has taken place here. So I don't think it just falls on the American government, though there's a responsibility that must be put forward. It also is incumbent on many countries within the European Union and the international community to really step up and call for accountability and to punish those persons who took place in this tragic killing.
Salman, let me bring you in here. What we're seeing is a situation develop Plenty of diplomatic activity, as we've already said, but a narrative developing that the Saudis may well blame rogue intelligence elements. The Turks are going to have to go along with that, as well as the US, if that becomes the narrative that the Saudis want to put out there. Is it therefore a cover-up, or is it therefore a way of all parties saving face and being able to go about business as normal?
Well, given the circumstances and the nature of the crime that has happened, it is really hard for us to claim whether there is a cover-up in this situation, or the parties are seeking an accountability genuinely. But the thing is that if the parties are find enough ground to agree on and seek accountability, that it would be best for all the parties to waive the immunity of the consular staff, and then the Turkish authorities would be able to exercise their jurisdiction for the perpetrators who commit those crimes. And alternatively, the Saudi Arabia can also repatriate its consular staff and prosecute them in their domestic courts. But in either way, either the Turkish authorities prosecute them, or they go without any proper jurisdiction. The consular staff who will try to return their work back will not be practically able to engage in an effective diplomacy with Turkish authorities, given the circumstances of this situation.
We are coming towards the end of the show. I would like to ask each of you a quick question. You have 30 seconds to answer, each of you. The question is very simple. I'll start with Ankara first. What needs to come out in order for the world to draw a line under this affair, both diplomatically and with the truth being at the centre of it? What needs to come out? What would you like to see? Just a very quick answer.
It's very open that it is a diplomatic mission, and the country who is owning the diplomatic mission is the responsible for what has happened. The Saudis are telling that they are admitting or confirming the murder over there. The murderer cannot confirm it. They can confess it what happened. First of all, the 15 guards, whether they are responsible or not, should be decided. And the very important point is who is behind this order to kill Mr. Khashoggi should be found out. This is very important.
To you, John Jones in Washington, D.C., what would you like to see? What would you like to see come out? What's credible enough for you?
You need a transparent, independent, credible investigation into exactly what happened and who is responsible. It's obvious that the Saudis cannot investigate themselves, so you do need a coalition to participate in a transparent investigation to get to the bottom of what actually happened. And just one quick point regarding the rogue killer statement, I think because that was leaked out, that was something that was probably tested by the Saudis. And you can just tell by the response of the domestic and international community, that explanation is probably not going to work. So I think the Saudis will be left with no choice but in the end to allow an investigation that is outside of their control to happen to get to the bottom of what actually took place.
To Salman in Istanbul, very quickly, what can international law do to get a credible answer to the Khashoggi affair? Just very quickly.
Well, the problem with so many people are receiving diplomatic and consular privileges and immunities, and there is a likelihood that a lot of people are have the opportunity to abuse their privileges and immunities. And so the international community should rethink about changing the convention in the way that the sending state should not have the full authority to either give the consent for a genuine investigation or not. So there will be enough, if there will be enough basis to make this change, maybe the international community should change the way of protecting the diplomatic and consular staff and providing more accountability for the victims.
To all our guests, I want to thank you, Osman Sert, John H. Jones, and Salman Akshengay. Thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is AJ Inside Story, @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.